Hi, I'm Gary Striegler, and this is the first video that I want to share of all the things I've learned about miter saws in the almost 50 years I've been working with miter saws. Okay, well maybe I'm not going to share everything, but I'm going to try and share a whole lot. The first thing I want to do is just generally talk about miter saws. When I first started, there was like one option. It was a 9-inch belt-driven Rockwell miter saw. And now there's just tons of different options for miter saws. Some, like this one, are battery operated. It's absolutely amazing how much power and performance that you can get out of a saw like this. And there's still a lot of standard corded saws. The miter saws pretty much break into two different types. One would be a sliding miter saw like this, which will slide back and forth, and it can also be locked into a fixed position so that you can make cuts very much like a fixed head miter saw. Of course, the other type, which is the way all the original saws were, is one that just simply has a fixed head that pivots. They did eventually start adding beveling capacity to those miter saws. That first one I've used wouldn't even bevel back and forth. In other words, beveling is the head tiltings. So to use one of these miter saws, there's two different things. You're first of all going to have a mitered angle, which would be what you would set the saw in this way, and then the bevel capacity. Most of the saws today are going to bevel both directions. Some of the most economical saws are only going to bevel one direction. There's also a variety like this particular saw will cut all the way 60 degrees to this side, and just goes to a 45 on this side. So when you're thinking about buying a miter saw, I guess the first decision you have to make is, do I want one that's cordless for more portability and kind of convenience? Or do I want to go with a miter saw that still needs to plug in? Those are generally going to cost maybe a little bit less than the cordless ones. Then the next thing is, how much capacity do I need? This has a 10-inch blade, and there's a lot of saws that have 10-inch blades. The other size that's very common right now is just a 12-inch blade. For a while, before we started getting the slide miter saws, or the beveling miter saws, there were some really big miter saws. At one time I had a miter saw that I think took like a 15-inch blade. And the reason for that was so that you could cut really big moldings nested or in place. But in today's world, with the sliding miter saws and the double bevel miter saws, probably 12 inches is about the biggest you need to consider, unless you're doing timber framing or something like that. And generally miter saws don't come into play that way. So capacity is one of the biggest things, and there's two types of capacity on a saw. Sometimes we cut with a piece of trim laying flat like this, or doesn't even have to be a piece of trim. It can be, flat stock or whatever. And the other capacity is cutting vertically like this. So, that's what's one of the things you need to check out. You need to think about what you're going to be doing with a saw. If you're mainly doing furniture making and cabinetry, you probably don't need a ton of vertical capacity, or for that matter, a whole lot of this horizontal capacity. But, if you're going to be working, run a lot of big crown molding or something, then this horizontal capacity can be important to you. I also like, as much as possible, to cut like my baseboard vertically. The reason for that is because I'm never cutting through more than 3/4 of an inch of wood. When I lay it flat and fold this over, then I'm cutting through a whole lot more wood, and it just seems to kind of bog the saw down. Also tends to make the blade maybe want to deflect a little bit. So, the capacity of a saw, both in how much it'll slide or not slide, the bevel, left or right hand bevel, single bevel or double bevel, also the variety of just how far it will go on the mitered angle, are all things that you want to think about when you buy a miter saw. And just generally, the thing I always tell people is, you're probably going to pretty much get what you pay for. Don't expect a miter saw that you buy, for under $200 to really perform well if you're trying to do fine trim work and cabinetry. And for me, that's absolutely, what I want to do is I want to cut joints that when they go together, they really, really look nice. that makes me feel great about my work, feels like I've accomplished something, and it also leads to more work since I'm a professional. Super quick, the other parts of the saw setup besides just the miter saw is the blade. And I'll tell you that you want to invest some money in getting a good blade, because even the best saw with a bad blade is not going to get a great cut. My general rule of thumb is you probably won't be paying anywhere from probably $90 to $150, depending on what type of blade that you're going to use, to get a really good high quality blade that's going to give you a cut that's super smooth, because the smoother the cut, the better the joint is going to go together. And also that'll help avoid that blade deflection where the blade kind of wanders off and you don't get a true joint. And then just super quick, kind of the third part of it is some sort of a stand. I used to see guys with a saw just on the floor working all day, kneeling down, making cuts. That's hard on your body. And it's also, you have a hard time seeing what you're cutting. So get some sort of a stand. This is a highly portable stand that works well. I've also seen stands, and the longer I'm going to be in the job, the more I want to set up a stand that will have really accurate stops so I can make repetitive cuts. But in my opinion, it's just much safer and much better to work with a saw on a stand that's a really sturdy, dependable stand. Now, it's one other thing that I just came to mind that I forgot to mention. A lot of today's saws have a work light like this one. And the great thing about that light is it creates a shadow in the blade, which shows me exactly where the cut is going to be. It's super, super accurate. So that's important to me. Realistically, I probably wouldn't buy a saw today that didn't have some sort of a shadow line, as opposed to a laser, which can be really finicky to adjust. I want something simple so that when it comes out of the box, it's ready to use and I don't have to do any adjusting. So that's a lot of general information about miter saws. Hopefully that was helpful to you.